So I named the presentation Redefine Your Digital Experience, because I think if you look at an industry at the moment, and you look at what is happening in the industry, everybody talks about a digital transformation, right? But actually what it only means to me is that most of us come out of a business, and particularly me, that is legacy. Right? We have a legacy business, regardless if it is you come from hospitality or where you come from, and you need to get into this journey where customers are buying from via digital transformation. Right? So they are buying into, you need to enable your product for the new digital world actually. That's what most of us actually as an organization, including HPE and Aruba, are in. And that is it's a different loyalty from probably your customer base set, and it's a complete different market actually. And that's what we think is, we need to redefine your digital experience. And actually what it means for me is if you're looking at for the ones let's see if this is working, maybe now, there we go. So if you're looking at what Aruba has been doing, for the ones that doesn't know Aruba, this is the history of Aruba, right? In 2002, Keith Melcote with a couple of others started Aruba. And actually they started as a security business. So the controllers you maybe know now were at that time a security business, and they've been transferred into a controller for wireless. That's why you see in 2006, so in 4 years, they have been already recognized as a market leader in WLAN. For a startup, that is really, really fast. Normally you have been as this innovative thing and show as innovation, nice company, but they haven't recognized as a WLAN leader. Then in 2007 they went IPO, and in 2007 they went IPO, and they also bought another company, as you see there, called Avenda and Airwave Wireless. And I'm going to give an Airwave presentation. The other thing you see with IPO is that they also, in 2013, they have been recognized as a market leader in network access control, because they also have bought a product called ClearPass, which is still there today. And I'll get back to that one later. In 2015, HPE and Aruba joined forces, and Aruba became the main networking division within Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And then recognized, Gartner changed the way they reporting, so now all of a sudden you don't have WLAN and wired, you now have a unified WLAN and a Magic Quadrant, so that's where they recognize as leader. And by today, we still have Keith Melcote. And think about this, it's actually now, I think 17 years ago. You have the founder that is still the founder president in the current company. And that says something, right? Look at any other company, you probably don't find this. It says something about the loyalty and the belief he has in this product. So it is one architecture they came up in that year, and they more or less extended that multi-vendor network, they extended it to integrate wired, then they extended it to WAN, cloud, data center, and then now you see a lot of them on IoT discussion, what needs to happen. So it's one architecture built to last actually. And that's, I think, what makes Aruba special in the industry. And why are we so focusing so on the edge? If you think about all your infrastructures you're operating with, either if you are from a partner and you're dealing with other organization, or it's your own IT department, the edge is the only place or the only location in your infrastructure where people, things, right? People, things, and people, I forgot the one actually. People, things, and places come together. So that's the only place in the infrastructure where you can drive innovation. If you really think about it, that's where you want to drive innovation. And what it means is different things for different vertical markets. So if you have a workplace, and I think everybody who is going in a digital workplace transformation in your company, or smart digital office, or something like that, where you want to get more mobility. Probably there's a few, and there's a lot of customers going. So there's a lot of organizations going through that, and what they want to achieve is better efficiency and better collaboration. For us as Aruba, even if you're looking at most of our buildings, and we just moved in the Netherlands in the building, it was very hard to attract young talent into our company. If they came to the old Aruba building, they said, I'm not going to work here, right? This was very corporate, we still had these screens between people, and it was not an open office, and there was no rooms to play or hang out with each other. If you now see the new office, it's much easier to attract young talent. So what it means for this smart digital workplace is twofold. One, for the people, that want to have a better organization to work with and a different way of working. On the other side, for the organization, is okay, how can you measure, right? How can you drive better collaboration and better efficiency? But also making sure that you can enable when people come in a meeting room, that automatically they log into their Skype for Business or a meeting room system, that they don't need to log into their laptop again or log into all the system, that everything is happening automatically. It's registered that you are in there and that you booked that meeting room. And it, probably not in your organization, but in ours, we have people that book meeting rooms for the whole year and don't show up 60% of the time. And how do you measure that, right? How can you get back to these people, say, hey, you didn't use that meeting room. Now, with a digital workplace, you can measure that because you know if they show up or they don't show up, and if they don't show up after 10 minutes, you can immediately say, hey, they are now, you can now just take over and it will be automatically registered in your name. You can flash the lights after 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the end. So you got a complete different way of using your building. But for real estate, it means that they can now really figure out what the cost is and how the building is being used, right? And you can also think about, okay, how can I do more green initiatives to also get to the sustainability of a business? And the last part is for a school, it means a different thing. A lot of schools we see starting with, hey, we need mobility, right? Because our students want to see Instagram or Netflix or they want to do YouTube, so they need to mobility. But it can be the real collaboration. I think tools like Office 365 or something like that really help in getting students working together. But we have a school presenting actually. From what it also means is how can you do now automatically counting if students are really in that room instead of writing it on paper, they are registered. And if you think about that, I have 3 sons, right? One is 18 and then 16 and 13. And the one thing they will never give away is their iPhone. Because what they do, and I have bad sons actually, so they are the most worst example. So they normally do this, and they call out the names and say yes, and the others say yes on his name on a different voice. So they say, okay, and then the teacher thinks he's registered in the classroom, right? But their phone, they will not give their phone to somebody else if they are not at school. So that's the way you can do automatic classroom system. But also what it means from a teacher perspective is how can you make sure that the teacher is able to use his automatic smart learning digital learning system without the students taking over, for example. So how can you secure that? And how can you also secure the access to all the other systems that they have, maybe for their grades or something like that. But for a store, it means a completely different thing. And I think the retail is there anybody from retail in the room? Okay, I think retail is the most exciting market at the moment. And the reason why is that you have all the legacy retails want to go to the online, and you have now the online retailers. They know that, okay, I am stuck with growth, right? I'm probably at the edge of what I can do, and they see the value of having just a physical kind of retail shop, right? So you see the market going completely against each other. And what it means for retail, I think, is how can you drive the next generation shopper experience? And what I mean by that is, imagine you have a platform where somebody already at home did some shopping. So you know that maybe he has been looking at, if you take IKEA example, at a certain IKEA, maybe you have been looking at certain clothes. So what if he has been looking at that and now he enters your shop? Then out of a sudden you can say, hey, you have been looking at this particular product, maybe you want to be guided because you maybe want to feel it, touch it, or get the experience of the true product, or maybe you want to fit it on. So that's a different experience. And if I'm a loyal customer, maybe I automatically want to see, hey, welcome Dobias and back to the shop. So if that's driving a different kind of experience, but for the shops, what you can do there, for example, let's say somebody is standing a long time in front of an aisle of a certain laptop. And so probably you then can say, okay, he probably can't make the decision, or maybe he needs to get some support from a sales perspective. So you can say to the employees, hey, somebody's watching there, maybe it's good if you send somebody and maybe support them, maybe you need some help with the product. That gives a different experience than, hey, we see that you are standing here, can we help you or can we guide you to this product? But you also know that how people are going to your shops. So where are the hotspots in your shop and how they are using your retail environment. And what you can do with that one is an interesting thing is if you maybe have specific areas but people never go, and maybe you have the things you want to sell there most often, right? So you have a wrong placement there. The other thing about the guidance to the shop is I had a discussion with Albertijn, it's one of the big retailers, and I said to Albertijn, I don't understand, you have a great app that you put recipes, for example, in your app, and you say, if you follow this, you can pick up your grocery stores instead of me. So I'm almost never in the grocery store, to be honest, but if I go, it's a pain. If my wife goes, she exactly knows where she needs to go, but I'm searching everywhere. So if I have an app and say, hey, and maybe you can even say, okay, if these are good for your heart or your blood pressure, you can take that app, take that recipe, and they guide you through things. That's a different shopper experience. For hospitality, and by the way, Diego and Graham, can you stand up? So I think we are the first vendor that have now a true global hospitality vertical market, and these are the two guys that are leading. Graham is more from sales, and Diego from a technical perspective leading the hospitality market. So you can sit down, you don't need to stay the whole session. So, but they are leading it, and we take this market very serious. They really drive it, but what it means from a hospitality business is, if you think about the hotel, actually this hotel doesn't have any airco, which is pretty complicated if it is 30 degrees for Guido and me actually to stay. But if you have a hotel, what do you want to know in the hotel, right? What if I come into the hotel, and probably most of you have children, they immediately want to get the Wi-Fi. And the hotels are really judged based on that experience. How quickly can I connect to the Wi-Fi, and how quickly is the experience I can see Netflix, I can see YouTube, or whatever. But the other part for a hotel means is how can you also drive more people to your own app platform, right? What does it mean if I have an app platform? I can maybe start to open doors, or I can maybe start to integrate my excursions that I want to offer. And then, back to the hotel, you can also figure out how people are flowing to your building. And if you have the right desk at a certain place to increase your sale from every hotel guest that comes into your shop, that comes into your hotel, you want to increase the sale as much as you can from every guest that comes to your hotel. So this is the way you can start using digital information to drive more business. And then from a hospital, it's a different thing. A hospital is driving the next generation patient experience. So actually my wife was now at a doctor, and she was complaining that I make an appointment and then I still need to wait half an hour before I'm the one. I'm not sure if that's the same here in Denmark, but at least in the Netherlands that's the case. So what about if you come to so they know you have an appointment, right? Most of them have an app. They know you have an appointment, and this is Stanford University and Stanford Healthcare really, really well. So if you come to their hospital, they automatically register you that they saw you. So hey, we saw you, we register you for your appointment instead of going to like a kiosk and then fill in all your information. And then they also say, hey, we see that you have an appointment at 10:30, but the doctor has like 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's better if you go to the restaurant and you get your second coffee or you get something additional, and we give you a 10 minutes heads up before you're ready. That's a different experience, right? Still, you have the same delay, but the experience is different. And then you move your way, and then you're automatically being guided to the hospital to your direction. So that's what I mean. But for a hospital, it also means that if you're looking at back from an advantage from a hospital, you exactly know how people, you get a real good idea how long are people waiting. So you can also try to really start to improve some of the efficiencies in these things. The other part from a hospital is more and more things get connected. Heart monitors, other things, like scanners, medicine, registration, get connected to the infrastructure. How can you secure that, right? These devices most of the times are not built to drive perfect high-end security. So how can you drive to do it, and how can you make sure that they can still talk to each other because they want to get some statistics out of it to do smart things for heart monitor or something out of it. And that's something that they need to think about. How can I connect these devices and make sure that nobody's playing with them, and that the data that I get out of it, and that's key, is accurate. Right? They need to be able, if they connect that device, that you can trust the data, because it is healthcare and it is really key. So that's for them an important thing, and that's why we focus so much on driving that experience on the edge. And what it means, And how we do it is this particular platform. And if you're looking at on the edge, on the lowest layer, you have the infrastructure component. So you have access points, you have switches, you have core switches, WAN, edge data center, IoT infrastructure. You have all kinds of devices that are running on the edge of the infrastructure. And that layer in Aruba is unified. And I get back to that one, what I mean with it. And on top of that, you want to drive additional value with services. Can mean network management, can mean network access control, so how you're going to onboard devices, or how you're going to allow devices what they are able to do. But also in the middle, you can see that you now want to drive a better service assurance. So how can you start measuring your infrastructure if you really move to this experience kind of way of thinking, then the customer is out of a sudden central thinking of the network. So then you need to think about how can I also measure the way he's going to perceive the network, right? Instead of it from an access point of view, how can you see it from a true client perspective? And that's what Guido will tell more about. And how can you drive more analytics? And then the last part is, how can we constantly keep on improving and solving business problems to drive the next generation edge experiences? And of course, you see the IoT infrastructure and gateways coming up. And this is what we call the edge software platform. And what we have been focusing on for a lot of years is focusing on the end user, driving that experience from an end user, making it easy to connect, drive that best experience, focus on the line of business, because this is key. If everything, and remember that we started this presentation with your digital experience, I think if IT is becoming so key in your customer, actually IT becomes almost like a critical component to drive your business instead of being a back-end function to your business. And this is, how can you make IT relevant to the line of business? Right? How can your IT department become relevant to your line of business? And what I mean with that is, think about that real estate for digital workplace. What can you do from an IT perspective, for example with Aruba Access Point, to give real estate the data to see how the desks are being used, or to see how the buildings are being used? For example, in retail, what can IT do to give that insight on how and who is going to shop, and if you have a loyal shopper, or if you have a new shopper, and how long people are in the shop. So how can the wireless infrastructure or the BLE infrastructure support you with that? And that's what I mean. This is where IT can become really critical in driving and supporting the business. Then the last part, and this is where you see us focusing a little bit more on the last year and a half. Okay, if we have this, and we got more and more data, and we got more and more devices, what can we do to give a better support and a different experience to the operators, right? To the IT operators. Can we be more proactive? Can we give them more information from the infrastructure? In other words, can we start using the network as a sensor and do something smart with that data to support the network administrator? The same counts for the security administrator. What can we do to support the security administrator from all the data and all the context we collect on the infrastructure and make sure we do smart things with it? And I get back to some examples. And remember that I said we are a unified hardware layer. And what I mean with that is, I think we are unique in the industry that whatever you choose, if you want to do an on-premise management or if you want to do a cloud management, the hardware layer will stay the same. So if your company is not completely ready, or maybe not even allowed to because of rules and regulation, then you can still have the same hardware, and maybe you will do a digital transformation, or you're going to consume some services out of the cloud, but you don't need to make a decision upfront on your hardware stack. Look at anybody else in the industry. You either choose for cloud software, cloud hardware, or on-premise hardware, on-premise software. You need to make an upfront decision, and you can't drive towards your own journey to the cloud. So that's what I meant with a unified hardware layer. What I want to do now is move up to some innovations we did, and starting with the wireless access layer. So we more or less move up the chain. I'm not going through all the products, but what we see here is Wi-Fi 6 is a big thing. And a lot of people ask me, hey, what do you mean with Wi-Fi 6? Actually, if you think about where the wireless industry is going, all the latest IEEE specifications like AC or G or where you come from when you jumped in, all about increasing speed. Increasing the speed of an individual user. Because think about a wireless infrastructure, the speed is dependent of the overall capacity, right? Because it is a shared medium. So what you see in AX is now, if you're looking at probably also at your own wireless infrastructure, it's not only about speed anymore. It is about different kind of devices and different kind of services. Out of a sudden, we need to do voice over Wi-Fi. Out of a sudden, we have Skype for Business over Wi-Fi. Now we have video applications over Wi-Fi. We need to do video streaming. We have IoT applications with maybe they don't need even speed, but they have a different kind of setup and maybe a different kind of security. So for me, 802.11ax, of course it increases speed, but it's all about driving an efficient Wi-Fi platform. The good thing to remember is that the second question I got, why is Aruba, they call it late to market with Wi-Fi 6 access point, and it was a good reason. As a vendor, you need to be very, very cautious. Remember that all the marketing hype you see on Wi-Fi 6, AX is not a standard yet. So that's a surprise for a lot of people, but it will be a standard roughly towards the end of the year. So that means that from our perspective, so we are a customer for some of the chipset vendors. They want to go early to market, they don't want to sell volumes of their chipset to us, to Cisco, to other vendors. But we need to be very cautious when we jump in to make sure that the hardware we sell you, we can software upgrade to support the latest standard. And I can commit to you that the whole hardware line we have is able to support the final standard. So that's a big thing, also from a confidence level and from an update level for you if you go for 6. What is it what you get if you now buy 6? There's not so many AX clients out there. So what you get now is an access point that has more CPU, more memory footprint. So from that perspective, you will get a little bit of faster speed already if you move to that particular infrastructure now. Then the other point is, we see that Wi-Fi becomes so key in infrastructure, so how are you going to extend that to everywhere? And we looked at products in the market, in particular the point-to-point products, they are very expensive. And not so much, everybody can pay mostly like a 20K to give a couple of meters Wi-Fi. The big problem there is to operate them. So if you have the weather not here that bad, but I heard that some of them had really bad weather yesterday, then most of the times it means that you need to realign these access points. The line, because they need a line of sight, and that is a cost-effective thing. You need the company to come in, they need to realign it, then it's working again, etc. What we try to do is come up with a solution up to 500 meters. So we keep on focusing, not on the backhaul system, but on the enterprise connection. If you have maybe you can't go fiber under the road, or you have locations where you need to extend your Wi-Fi, that's the solution. For up to 500 meters, you roughly get a little bit more than a gigabit performance. And what we did is we're using a 60 gigahertz radio so we can get the speed, but we're also using 5 gigahertz radio because 60 gigahertz is very, very sensitive for weather. So then if the weather is bad, you at least swap to 5 and you still have a good connection. The other thing we did is we made a 40-degree angle antenna. So regardless if it goes out of sync, within 40 degrees you still have a connection. And the cost of these is a complete different thing. Then the last thing is, some of these access points, in order to use full power out of them and to get full, in particular the high density APs, and you want to use every function and every speed, you need to get higher than the default power over Ethernet plus. By the way, there's the weather coming. So that's why we came also with an AX rated switches to get higher power up to 60 watts on a specific port. It's not just for access point, you can maybe also use it for cameras or other devices, but that's the reason why we did it. And then the last part, if your power is going to increase, how can you still meet that green initiative? So what we know how many clients are connected to a certain AP. So if there's only 2 connected to a certain AP, you can lower the amount of power and still deliver the right performance, because these things are built to support more clients in the infrastructure. If the clients increases, we're automatically going to increase the power. And this way we can dynamically tune the power in the environment and make sure you can meet from that side a green initiative and keep on to your sustainability goals of a company. So what for Wi-Fi 6, so we didn't just release one single AP. As you can see, we delivered a whole chain of application in order to make sure that you can surely start implementing these things and get the value and benefits out of it. So what do we do from a dynamic segmentation perspective? And this is a big thing for us, because if you're looking at ClearPath, I think we also really change the way we look at networking infrastructures. If you see here on the end, most organizations need to get different users, different user roles with different kind of devices on the networking infrastructure, maybe different things even that don't even have a user, and these different things need to connect to something on the network. And what you can do with dynamic segmentation, the whole thing started initially by just pushing roles to access points. And this role says, okay, he's allowed to talk to application XYZ, he's allowed to maybe connect to the finance application, or if you are maybe a temperature sensor, then maybe the temperature sensor is only allowed to speak to the climate control system, because why should it have access to the complete network? So, and the same counts maybe for a smart TV or something else like that. Because if you open up a smart TV and you will scan where the smart TVs are talking to, you will be surprised in your infrastructure. So, this is where you define the roles. And the roles were being pushed to an access point initially, or to the controller. And later on, we also were pushing roles to switches. So this is where you got dynamic roles. But what we saw is that a lot of organizations really liked the way wireless was working actually. So you had an access point, and the access point was connected to a controller, and more or less all the magic happens in the controller. So it's a simplicity and efficiency kind of move. So what we did is we came up with something what we call tunnel node, and we have two versions of it. So now we can say, in particular, this is what we do for retail. For example, if you're looking at for some of the big retailers we support, this is what we do. We do every port of the switch, we tunnel to the controller. That means that you don't need any configuration anymore on the switch other than an IP address, host name, and maybe some time thing. So you immediately reduce the amount of config you have on the switch. And that's what you do with dynamic segmentation. But sometimes for enterprise organizations, I'm a little bit skeptical. That also means you immediately have layer 7, full visibility and full control on what's happening in your infrastructure. You get full visibility. But some said, well, I maybe want to depend, I trust my systems, and that's where we came up also with a version of this, what we call user-based tunnel node. So based on the user, or based on the device, you set up a tunnel to a controller. So now, for example, maybe only for your IoT devices, you say, if it is an IoT device of this version of a video camera with this firmware, I set up the tunnel to a controller, and then build up the additional layer of security of having the visibility and having that layer 7 firewall. If it is a corporate laptop that is completely controlled by endpoint security in action, I'm fine if it goes authenticated and get a role in the network. So this is the way you now can do. And if you, a lot of questions I get, if it's scalable, Harvard University runs 20,000 tunnels concurrent every day on their infrastructure. So we can scale this out heavily, right? Of course you need sometimes more controller, but it's where you got better visibility, because the config on the switches completely disappears. I always say the reason why you have a management system is to do zero-touch provisioning then, and do some monitoring. All your adds, move, and changes will go for something called ClearPass, because depending who you are, what you want on the network, automatically you get the right role in the network. That's why dynamic segmentation is a key thing for us on the infrastructure. So then we move forward. So we profile every device that gets on the network. Always when I do a presentation, or always when we do a ClearPass POC in the industry, I always ask, who knows exactly what is running on their infrastructure? Who is dare to say, I'm 100% sure that I know all the devices and all the users that come on my infrastructure every day? And that's a complicated thing to do. So by ClearPass, if you just have ClearPass, you get device profiling. So the first thing it does is make visible for you who access your infrastructure, who and what. But we know that there comes an end to the way we're using current profile technology. That's why we introduced something called ClearPass Device Insight. And this is a new product for us, so we are learning it to the market. But now we can, out of a sudden, this is a cloud-based product, by the way, we can start to use machine learning algorithms to start to identify devices. And to give you an example, we had a test with ClearPass. There was around 10 cameras, 10 just video cameras, right, you use for security. 8 of them were exactly the same internal enclosure. So how can you then start to differentiate them, right? How can you start to differentiate? You can start to see where they talk to. So if they, some go to maybe vendor X, some go to vendor I, so based on the traffic they sent, you can start to verify, okay, I can now know this is a camera from vendor X or Y. And with Device Insight, we're using our machine learning algorithms, and because we're doing this for so many customers in the world, and it's all anonymized, we also learn from other locations, other devices, which will be feedback into your organization also. And then ClearPass Device Insight will be feeding that back to ClearPass, so you can start making decisions. Okay, I want a Bosch camera with this firmware allowing on my network, but if it is another camera, I don't allow it on my network. This is the way you can then start to use that kind of information. So it's more or less a next generation profile. And then we have Net Insight. So remember that I said we want to start using the network as a sensor. So if the way how I always explain it is, we know exactly if your phone is able to talk about 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So we know that your phone is capable. So if we know we have X amount of devices that are 5 gigahertz capable, but we only have 20% of them are connecting to the 5 gigahertz, which you maybe want them to connect to the 5 gigahertz to give them a better position. That's where, and then the tool will say, hey, we see that you have X amount of devices, we see that only in this particular situation it connects, and we also know the configuration. So just to think about every Wi-Fi, more or less, there's about 100 parameters that you can set on your access point for optimizing the RF. Most organizations using 3 or 4 of these parameters. And actually they maybe have 2 or 3 profiles. So you can question yourself, okay, am I always optimizing the configuration settings for the users, right, or for a particular area? So if you then, for example, know that you have these devices, the tool will say, if you change X, Y, Z, you change this on this particular access point, more clients will move to 5 gigahertz, potentially you will have less calls on your help desk, but the main thing is you have a better experience for your users. And this is the way, and you also start to profile these devices. So if you have, for example, a hallway access point is quick, right? You connect and disconnect. You connect and disconnect. Most of the time you're not very long in a certain area, but if you have a meeting room, you're long in that area. So the tool will always say, hey, we identify this as a hallway access point because we see this behavior on the access point, change these settings because you got a better performance. What it always also do is compare organizations of the same size. They can say, hey, this organization, not the name of course, but organization got a better Wi-Fi score because it has this change setting. So this is the way you got more or less like pre-scripted, and this is the way we wanna drive a better experience for these IT administrators, as I said, and you can support that. And then we have core switching, right? We're moving down the lane, we have the edge switch, Wi-Fi 6, and then we're moving up the chain in core switching. This is what we started the project, what we started a couple of years ago, and we had to make a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to build a legacy core switch, or do we think we need something else? Because we could make that decision at that time if you build something completely new. And we said, okay, we really need to build a complete new core switch because of the distributed traffic flows from either cloud or internal, and because of the different type of devices to your network infrastructure. So what we said, that we want to have a switch that is not completely reliant anymore on configuration files. Because configuration files is very, very hard to build high reliability infrastructure. So that's now, even though if you work on it, you don't see it, we now have a database in the switch. And the only thing we need to do to deliver high availability is syncing that database, which is already done in probably most of your office applications that you are using in your infrastructure. But the network administrator will not see it. The other advantage we get if we expose everything on the database is automatically is exposed outside by an external API to maybe your drive your automation or your continuous development or your continuous innovation story. The other thing we did also is we built an additional database in there. It's called a time series database. And with the time series database, and everybody that's doing a lot of network troubleshooting or something, the biggest, the hardest thing is to capture something in a moment in time. If you have an issue, somebody says he has an issue, and you don't see it, right? You only see it maybe if a certain application sends something, or a certain actions read out, and capture that is very, very hard. It's very, very hard to do. So that's why we have that additional database. And then we built this network analytics engine in there. So now all of a sudden, we can capture everything that goes through the box in a database, and we can also start to correlate multiple events. So you more or less got your troubleshooting agent in there, but you can also start to use it and then maybe expose it to your own big data system for whatever you want to use it for. Just a couple of examples, because I'd rather use this one. This is customers where we have been working with to drive something. The first one is Friesland College. Friesland College is a school, roughly about 15,000 students and about 3,000 to 2,000 employees. Actually, the funny thing with them is, remember that I said the ClearPass profiling? We asked them, before they started the project, they will say, 30 to 35 devices maximum. After a week of running profiling, they had 93,000 devices on our infrastructure. So imagine, if you want to drive security, you have a gap of 60,000 devices where you need to do something with. But the other thing they said is, we now have this analytics engine, and a lot of the network administrators, they have a process of service management. So if a network administrator makes a change, he needs to log a goal, he needs to write the change he did, and then it is logged into the system. But a lot of times the network administrators were called into something else and move on and forgot to log that goal. It was not, by the way, that they hated or was not on purpose, but just by the day-to-day operation. So what we did for them is we wrote an agent. Every change that a network administrator is making, it automatically makes it go. For them it was Top Desk, which was more like a Dutch kind of application, but we also do it for ServiceNow, for example. So every change they make, all the commands they type, plus the individual, automatically log. The call was closed, but they always had now a trace of all the changes being made on a day-to-day basis on that infrastructure. The other thing is, for example, you can see that this Zoho is like almost like an Amazon kind of data center in India, and Zoho has very, very specific traffic flows with some of the problems. And for them it was very hard to proactively do triggering on that, because it was correlating a couple of events. We wrote an agent for them because the traffic was going through the box. And we wrote an agent for them to automatically detect this chain of problems. The other thing you see with an agent is every agent gets its own dashboard, and you always can see a correlation between configuration changes and how that agent will respond. So what we saw a lot, for example, with a voice over IP agent we made, is that there was a customer that was complaining on voice over IP, and we wrote an agent for them, and we saw that the queue was starting to fill up after a configuration change, because you see that there is a triangle, and you can click on that triangle, and you see the before and after of the change. And all of a sudden, that change showed that somebody made a change in the ACL of the quality of service and allowed certain default traffic into the highest queue. So meaning that's the reason why the queue fell up and why they had a bad quality of service perspective. So that's what you can see from custom. We also do code development, so if you have an idea, we support you in making the script if you are. It should be very easy, but still sometimes it is easy to work in combination with us. Everything that we do, we publish something called Aruba Solution Exchange to build up the community of more examples that you can start videos. You can see Aruba certified and the difference between communities. So that's a way you can differentiate them. So what about the data center? So we move up now from the core to the data center. And we believe this is the world we are in. Everybody comes from the past. Everything on-premise, huge data centers. If I come to a lot of data centers at customer, I see a lot of empty space these days because of also consolidation of service, but also because of consolidation of the second part, is that every time you're going to probably make a decision what I'm going to move out and what I will stay in my own data center. Probably you make that cost decision, right? Who has Office 365? Okay, that's what I mean. Probably you don't need to run all your Exchange servers, you don't have all your storage anymore, you all push that back to Microsoft. So that's the decisions you make. So for me, we are now in this middle world, right? Where you have, okay, I stick something to my legacy application in my own data center, maybe I have a virtual private cloud in Azure, or maybe on Google Cloud Platform, or Amazon, and maybe I'm consuming some of the services as a software as a service. So we think that the next thing will happen is this. Push the data centers that you have on premise will be pushed to the edge of your networking infrastructure. And then you aggregate data up to cloud, right? Or your virtual private cloud. And I will tell you why. This is my own monoline ugly slide that we made. Is think about things and people on the edge. Then consider your own applications and move to this chain, right? Imagine you are an industry company and you need to make an autonomous decision if something is red or blue. That's special. But I will continue. I think I know my slides. So imagine the I don't have this thing needed anymore now. So imagine that we have this data center. Imagine that you need to make a decision if something is red or blue. Then you better do that as close as possible if something is going super fast through the build, across your sensor, right? Then, because otherwise you get the latency from the network to make that decision. So then, you will decide that at the edge, and at the edge, then you maybe make that decisions, and maybe you then measure how many faults you make, and you send the aggregated data up. The same counts if you want to do something in a retail shop, and you want to do something on a secure measurement. You better do that as close as possible at the edge, and then you send the measurement up for maybe for better statistics or for aggregation of the data. And that counts the same for if you do video surveillance in a city, for example. I don't know, we'll see. And then we do video surveillance, and you need to make a decision if somebody is doing bad or wrong, or maybe there's a fight happening or something. You better do it as close as possible at the edge as you can. That's why I think most of these data centers will move to the edge, and you aggregate out. And that means if you think about then what will happen is that your data centers will be completely distributed through your enterprise environment. And that's why we created something called NetEdit, where you can start using all these analytics up in one single database. And if you move that in one single database, now you can say, hey, is this particular switch has configured X, Y, and Z, or not? Or which switch doesn't have this configured? And you can also start to do continuous validation of products, right? Do I always meet my compliance of my company? Yes or no? Because you're consuming all this data centers, you can still make this configuration as distributed to your infrastructure. And that's how we look at the data center. And throughout the end of the year, you will see more and more functionality coming from us in the CX switches to drive that data center functionality, but also to drive that automation of policies for your data center to manage it in a distributed fashion. That's where we will strongly and heavily focus on. So then we have the data center. And then we need to move up the chain, and that's where Guido will start to talk about his cloud. But let's say you have a distributed data center, a level of distributed data center, a distributed enterprise environment. Then you also need to think about, okay, how do I go to solve my branch problem, right? You see a lot of organizations making decisions. I want to make a decision of choice. Hey, we are back. So let's move on.
Way.
We are back. This was the data center. Now this was the connect edge to the cloud. So, one further. Yeah. This was connecting edge to the cloud is where you can see how can we solve that branch problem. The reason why we didn't jump in the SD-WAN market is exactly because we think that the branch problem is bigger than just sending traffic over internet links and do that efficiently. And what I mean with that is you still have to deal with the security policy in your branch. You still have to deal with switches, and you still have to drive, I'm scared now because it blow up on behind me or something. And you still have to figure out if there is mobility needed in these branch offices, right? And that's where we said, okay, let's create a complete architecture. And we call that architecture, is it working actually?
Yes.
Yeah. And we call that architecture software-defined branch. So what we solve figure out what we did in the LAN with all the policies. We exactly took that same architecture to the branches. So you can drive your mobility, you can drive your security, and guess what we have been adding to the gateway is the software-defined WAN functionality. So you can add LTE, you can add multiple internet connections, and you can either lower your MPLS connectivity from a cost perspective, or maybe even remove, because you have a cloud vision anyhow, and most of your traffic will either go to Microsoft Global WAN or to go internet in general. And then measure these applications and make sure you always deliver the right experience to your user. That's why we call this software-defined WAN. And we learn. For example, the last thing there is from a rollout we did for McDonald's in the US. We deployed 40,000 locations for McDonald's, and we did roughly about 500 a week for them. And the reason is, we learned in that deployment is that a lot of times not the most experienced people go on site. And that is logical, and a lot of times, also for example, retailers work with companies that understand their shops, know the electrician, and know how to rebuild them. So they have a very good knowledge. With that app, they can just scan the device will automatically add it to Central, and then everything will be deployed. And it's like a stoplight system that the engineer on site, or the one that's putting the equipment in, can see, okay, it is connected, I'm quite sure that everything is working out, and they can make changes. So we had a whole chain of product in the software-defined WAN stack. So what we did is we took software-defined LAN, and we pushed that into software-defined WAN. Then we won a CRM Tech Innovation Award in 2018. Actually, we, in the first Magic Quadrant in SD-WAN, Gartner didn't accept us because we were pushing software-defined branch. Some of IDC, for example, start to talk now about software-defined branch and not about software-defined WAN. So probably you will see some changes moving forward from an analyst perspective on this. So then what do we do more to drive? Everything is breaking now. So what do we do more to drive additional things, right? We want to drive the better end user experience. Are you onboard devices? Are you connecting? How can you bring multiple devices in a hotel, for example, and making sure that people all get the right experience they want? Then line of business, right? For Meridian, how can you, for example, start to use BLE for location-based system, or start to enabling better experience on your own applications and start to integrate location services? Or for example, what you see a lot, Capgemini is now working on something actually that consisted of a hackathon. Capgemini is doing something now, what they called, they are busy with a smart digital transformation, but they just want to give more experience than just, what they do is they invented a game. They see that a lot of times in these new buildings, people don't sit everywhere, and people don't know each other in buildings, particularly in larger locations. What they do there is they have this app, and then out of a sudden, randomized, two people need to meet at a coffee location in a certain place. The one that's first, that doesn't need to pay the coffee, right? The other one, the second, needs to pay the coffee, and they need to have a quick conversation. We're trying this out in their own building in Paris, and it's that they really, really like, and they also saw an increase in how people start to understand what other people was doing, and start to understanding about the business. You know, it was fun, and it started at a hackathon we did with them. But you can start to find your friends, know if people are in the building, where are they, to more efficient, but also, of course, count where is my meeting room, automatically log into the meeting room, etc. Then user experience insight. I will not tell a lot about it because Guido is going to give you all the details, but this is about the next generation measuring how your users are perceiving the application. So how are they uploading traffic to Dropbox? How is their Skype for Business Call from a user perspective and not from an access point perspective? But Guido will dive into it. Introspect is everything about the next generation security. So if we have all this IoT traffic and everything is going to the cloud, then how can you know and start to learn the behavior? Because a firewall, if a firewall needs to make a decision, always needs to go through the box, right? Then it knows about the traffic. That's where we came up with ClearPass in the ecosystem. So how can ClearPass make the firewall more smart, and how can the firewall use ClearPass to do things on the network? But we saw another trend is that if you, for example, have all these IoT devices, and let's agree that they are not built for security and not built for high-end encryption. A temperature sensor is built to measure temperature the next 20 years, very accurate. And it, for example, measures it every 5 seconds. In a certain packet size, one of the temperature sensors start to do this every second. And all the other temperature sensors in your organization still keep to the 5 seconds and a certain packet size, then maybe potentially something else is going on in that infrastructure. And that's where introspect is looking at the behavior of users, compare the behavior of a user to the group the user belongs to, and then start to see if there's anomalies going on from a security perspective. So it's what they call user and entity behavior analytics. So it's a different way of security without getting traffic to a box. We also made, we're not just doing this in IT, we also have a partnership with Siemens for operational technology. Because what we see there a lot, for example, Heineken is a big customer of us, they need to bring data now from the OT world to the IT world to do maybe proactive maintenance, or to allow a lot of the industries don't own the industry anymore, right? If you go to Heineken, all the machines out there are from another company, or from multiple companies, or they are just leasing them out of them and they just get their beer brewed properly. But they just own, so the other vendors want to get data out of these machines to proactively see if something is going wrong, but also to collect it from all other companies they work with to statistically see if they can improve something or if they can improve a component, etc. And that's why we did with this relationship with Siemens to properly do that, because OT world is a different thing, right? They build things to last for 10, 20 years. For a switcher, they need to give guarantees to these factories that this doesn't change in the next 10 years, you give support and for 20 years on, right? It's a different world. So that's why we went into partnership with them. So we want to automate everything. We want to automate everything from a provisioning perspective. The only way we can do that is because we automate everything from a policy perspective. Because policy is managing all your adds, move, and changes daily. You can simplify the configuration on your devices. It's easier to automate your provisioning. And then the last thing is something we call AIOps. How can we start using the networking as a sensor and start using the ecosystem as a sensor to do better, more proactive from a management perspective, but also drive different security perspective, and maybe even drive a next generation edge experience. So this is the Magic Quadrant, and we are a market leader. You can see we are a little bit more innovative, seen as Cisco. Of course, Cisco is a big market leader also there, so it's good for competition to make sure everybody keeps on driving the industry forward. This is something called the Magic Critical Capabilities Report. What you can do there is if you are a Gartner member, you have the seat, then you can rank what is important for your infrastructure. Is it security? Is it wired? Is it wired? You can rank how important, and then you get a vendor recommendation out of it. And out of 5 out of 6, we have been ranked the highest by Gartner in this field. And as Lasse told me, I'm a long time in this industry. So when I started in the HP networking, we were number 15 on the market. So for me, this is a big step in the journey where we are right now. Airnets community, we try to give you a customer first, customer last mentality. On the Airnets community, you can find all kinds of information. Technical people are chatting with each other to see how you can configure things, or just having a technology discussion. And as said, we try to drive a customer first, customer last mentality. And we drive amazing experience with amazing simplicity. Thank you very much.